Okay, well, welcome everybody, and it's really great to see so many people here today. My name's Bryony Gilbert. I've been an AL, a tutor at the Open University since 2006, which was around the first time I think I met Mel, who I'm really pleased to be interviewing today. So we go back a long way, both as tutors and now we're student experience managers. In fact, I think you were my SEM at one point when I was a tutor, Mel, in the way of OU things. So
Yeah.
I work at level one and also on the SQE modules, and Mel works on various things, including level one. So the idea behind these sessions is to think about what working in the law is like in real life, but also to put a focus on diversity, equality, inclusion in the legal profession. And that's something that, although both the solicitors profession and the bar have acknowledged that there needs to be an inclusive environment, it's not been an easy path to attain. And I think both the Solicitors Regulation Authority and the Bar Council acknowledge that there are still obstacles for various people. So for people from Black and minority backgrounds, people with disabilities of various sorts, people with neurodivergent issues, people with a range of sexualities, um, and genders, that there are still significant differences. So one of the themes we will be pursuing today actually is around equality, diversity, and what barriers and what ladders there might be to accessing various aspects of the legal profession. And today, as I say, I'm really thrilled to be chatting with Mel, who has come to us as I say, as a student experience manager, but a previous role was as head of legal affairs and information compliance for a very large public sector body. Which also appeals to me because I've also had experience of working in the public sector, though nowhere quite so large. But I think my first question, Mel, has got to be, gosh, that's quite a job title. So what is a head of legal affairs and information compliance?
Thank you, Bryony. Yeah, I apologise for the very long title. I had to write that on everything all the time, so I didn't like the title I was given it. What it was, I started off as a legal affairs manager, and I like working public sector. I've always worked public sector. And actually, my role, be it head or be it manager, was to sort out all the legal stuff, basically. It was broad, whatever came my way. There was a contracts team and procurement team who dealt with the big contracts because it was a very large organisation, large projects that I worked on as well. So they dealt with that, but I dealt with everything else that came up. And then it's quite specialist, so I'd also resource external barristers and advisors as well. But there was at one point there was just me and half a support person, and then got the information compliance as well, because somebody left. There was a restructure, so again, lots of data protection queries, information rights queries would come through. So we ended up with a small team of law queries and then also data protection, that kind of thing. So it was kind of an unusual catch-all role.
Wow.
Loved it.
So I'm assuming that you didn't start off as the head of legal affairs. So how did you get to that position? Did you come in as a qualified solicitor?
I was by then, but actually my career has been unusual. So I did my law degree. And then I started going down the solicitor route. I got offered a kind of trainee role. It's called a trainee solicitor at the time. I would have gone to law school for a year. And I changed my mind. I just changed my mind. I didn't want to sit in an office any longer and carry on studying. I just had to change a plan. So instead, I was in the police for 10 years. So I did all sorts of roles there. And then after, I get a 10-year itch, basically. I should probably, you'll see in a minute, there's a bit of a pattern. So I started on the police for 10 years. And then I decided to change what I was doing and came down to London. And I was lucky enough to land a legal researcher role with a new, again, quite large public body. And when I was there, I got the opportunity for them to train me up and qualify as a solicitor. And then I got offered another job I applied for, and that's when I got my head of or manager role as well in the legal affairs and information compliance role. So yeah, each 10 years. And then after 10 years of there, I've ended up moving towards the Open University. I've been here more than 10 years though, so they've kept me.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that you were able to go into this role having had 10 years doing something else. So it wasn't a straight from school, straight from university role. Because I remember when I joined the legal profession, and we were recruiting colleagues, it was always said in my chambers, well, you don't really want to look at anybody who's over 35 because they won't be with us long enough to make a real impression and start bringing in either a lot of money or some kudos and recognition. Um, do you think that was the case for you when you were going into this work, and has it changed or improved for older applicants?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably about 30 when I moved towards the training solicitor and getting qualified. I've always just tried to apply for things and seek the opportunities and then evidence, use my background to really support what I want to keep doing. And I have been really lucky. And public sector, I mean, there's not a lot of roles out there, and I kept my options open. I applied for lots of other positions and roles, but didn't even hear back. So and also, I want to work for an employer that values my background, values my experience, and makes the most of it. And that's why I blossom in those roles, because then, you want to stand out from the candidates. And I want to work for places that actually appreciate me for my personality, my background, and what I bring to a role. So, yeah, I think you just have to keep your options open.
Mm. So it sounds like you started from the position of what skills and qualifications can I bring and what roles will match the skill set that I've got.
Yeah, and I've always been open with the roles because actually, when I went down, it was called legal researcher and PA. I'll confess now, I was the world's worst PA. I can't PA. It's a very specialist skill, and I didn't have that. But I still managed to get the role, and then that bit disappeared because most of us doing that role also weren't very. There's two of us at the time, and we were far strong on the legal research, and they realised actually the support role could sit elsewhere because we demonstrated our strong skills, and that's how we both got our training contracts as well. But it didn't put me off the job. I still applied for something that I probably wouldn't get, but you never know. And then I say I will do whatever the role requires. If it meant a printing, my boss at the time used to like me print off all her emails, and then she'd write yes on it and I'd type it. And I would do that if they wanted me to do it. I wasn't kind of dead set exactly what area of law I was going to practice in and exactly what role. So again, it is a bit of a theme. I've just kind of kept it open, the options and roles I'd apply for.
Yeah. So what would a day in the life of somebody working as a legal advisor or in the legal department of a public sector authority look like?
Well, mine, I was very general, and I really like that. I do have a planning and I do have a transport, and I probably have judicial review as my areas of specialisms, but actually I would deal with anything, and I really enjoyed that. And so actually my legal research skills were really, really crucial. But even if you are specialist, so if you're a specialist planner, I work with lots of lawyers who were specialist planners and transport lawyers, etc. But you still have to have those legal research skills. But I felt confident enough to kind of say, send it my way, and I will give it a good go. And if I know my limit, and I know at times the consequences if it wasn't specialist advisors. So often I would get advice blessed. So when I became a more senior lawyer running my own team, I would sometimes just get my advice confirmed. And that's how I kind of ran it. But those legal research skills, oh, it's a you can't give a piece of advice without double checking you're still correct, because it could have changed the day before. There could be legislation changing. So
Yeah. Do you think it's important to be able to read and understand legislation and secondary legislation?
yeah, well, we work with it. They're all the key legal skills, aren't they? So, I say an average day, I can't really describe because it would just have you just have a query come in, and because we were internal as well, I used to find a lot of the specialist teams knew a lot of law themselves, so they would have read the legislation. You needed to be ahead and better of them, but also develop that relationship with them. So it's wider than just, your standard legal skills. But yes, we'd sit and sometimes we'd sit and read together, and they were all lawyers, and just go through it. So yeah, I mean it's kind of exciting because it's quite broad, and you'll develop them as a student as well as you go through.
Yeah. So, what sort of people were you working with? What sort of agencies, stakeholders? I mean, obviously your employer, but it sounds as if there were quite a wide range of teams that you had to interact with.
I've always worked in-house. So what that means is that my clients were internal to me, so different departments, etc. And as I just said, you kind of you can't assume they're going to come to you, and you don't want to look as the blocker. So my approach has always been develop those relationships, see the law as protecting, the organization, the people that work within it, and supporting them. So I work with a lot of teams actually, because you think about it, big public sector bodies that I was in, you had policy officers, you had operational teams, you had your very senior officers as well. And there were different bodies as well that linked into them. But again, over the time, you kind of develop those relationships. And so I actually think on the law side, we actually were keen to present that we were supporting people. So yes, developing those relationships is really
Mm.
important.
Yeah, I was just thinking when I worked, and I worked for local authority, a very busy metropolitan borough, and as well as our sort of in-house teams, we would also work with local councillors. We would also work with the courts and the court service, in particular the court clerks and so on. We might work with public focus groups and all of that sort of thing. So actually, quite a wide range of people skills are needed. Would you, does that sound familiar?
It does, and actually, you just talked about the clerks there. They're obviously
Mm,
really crucial to me because I say we knew our limitations, and we had a group of barristers we go to, and we also had a few law firms we go to as well. But yeah, the clerks. I used to speak to clerks all the time for all sorts of things. So yes, you do develop those relationships.
yeah, thank you. So, thinking about it, you're doing such a wide range of work. What was the work-life balance like?
It is difficult. I think law. You've got set court times. People want the advice as soon as possible. It can be challenging. But I work public sector, so there is a recognition of that. I think you have to look after your own welfare as well, and the welfare of those, and in your teams. But yes, unfortunately, I do know that commercial firms, I've got obviously friends who work in big law firms, and at times the time frames are very tight. So, you do have to be flexible with times in some roles. So certainly when I was choosing my career, I knew I always wanted to be public sector because of the values, but also because of the focus on that balance as well.
Mm, that's great. Do you think that working in the public sector is an accessible profession in terms of making easy to, well, not easy, but it's accessible for all sorts of people that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I was quite proud because actually, even some of the work that I was doing was very much focused on supporting wider diversity outside the organisation. And actually, as a team, there was a specific focus on it, of recruiting people and being inclusive, no matter what your background. So I know you talked about like the diversity, but actually, a northern woman, it was quite diverse. I was quite unusual in some of the rooms, and chambers that I was working with. It was predominantly male and predominantly privately educated as well. So I've certainly been mentored, when I've applied for some things as well. Females were underrepresented, and also working class, first generation going to university. So there's also that aspect with the law. And if you look on the judicial recruitment website, you can see there's quite a push to, again, for that kind of layer and that kind of role to also be a lot more inclusive and diverse.
Mm. It sounds as if you had some good role models or mentors on your career journey.
I've always had one. I've been really, really lucky. I was talking about it the other day actually, and to have those strong role models and find people who just kind of are happy to go the extra mile and support you. And certainly, I try to reciprocate as much as I could back. And I've always tried to do that in my roles as well. When
Mm.
to try and support somebody who needs that extra help. But yeah, I've been really lucky.
Yeah. So, what specific advice might you give to students on overcoming hurdles to accessibility for working in the public sector?
I think I think it's kind of seeing, or using what you have as a positive, isn't it? It gives lots of evidence for things. I always say work backwards. When you see a role you like, look at those adverts. Think about, if you're recruiting, what would you be looking for? What makes you unique? Because all those diverse elements make you unique and special. For example, I used to volunteer, I used to be a union member. I always encourage my own students at the Open University, because I still teach. I encourage people to join the student committees to get experience of talking, working, listening at committees. And I say, just get involved with other things besides focusing on your studies, because as I talked about the different skills that you need, they're all going to be evidence and talked about it, on your CV and at interviews and things like that. So that would be my advice.
Mm. So things like perhaps being a school governor or on a parent-teacher committees or managing your sports club or whatever your hobby or your interest
Mhm.
is. Those sorts of things would be helpful?
They all sound brilliant, and I think you've been a school governor, haven't
I
you?
have, yes,
Um, I,
more
I
than
did
one
it for a
school.
while, yeah. But there's quite a lot of volunteering opportunities,
Mm,
and you can steer
mm,
them to help you with your future as well. That
yeah.
it's still volunteering, so.
Yeah, I have to say, being a governor actually allowed me to apply for the same role because it gave evidence that I could say that, well, actually, I have led policy and I have helped develop and led a small team and so on. So I think
Mhm,
anything that anybody can do
mhm,
within your own circle and things that interest you or that you are familiar with will translate into the sorts of skills that you need for the type of job that Mel is talking about. That's brilliant. Thank you, Mel. Um, I think we are close to questions, if there are any in the chat box. Ooh,
Yeah, there's one question, and if anyone else has got a question they want to put in the chat, please do press the Q&A function. Bryony, can I leave you to that question?
you can. Hello,
Thank you.
Mel. It's an excellent question. Hi, Mel. How would a person like myself who has a disability, in this case partially deaf, so have to wear hearing aids, go about being in the law industry? So I'll take that bit first, and then I'll come on to the next bit of the question. So how would you get within the law industry if you have um, uh, a physical disability or any form of additional
mhm.
need for support?
I don't mind sharing. Since I was very young, I've had hearing difficulties. It's only latter years that I've been able to wear hearing aids because the technology wasn't quite good enough to kind of help me with what was my problem. So actually, I've struggled with hearing people all my life actually, um, and I think again, I see that as a positive now because I really understand, those struggles and the impact of it, and I do share it with others as well. And as a profession, um, I can't see why that would limit you because um, people, if you share and make people aware, they do make adjustments. In court, they'll make adjustment. With colleagues, will make adjustment. And I work closely with Bryony, and anyone who works with me knows that I've always got like the text on, and also when they sit next to me, I often look at them and they just know that I've not quite understood what was said, so they'll repeat it for me. So I do find, colleagues do support, and I say it's never prevented me from doing it. I probably wouldn't have gotten the police if they could have actually assessed my hearing fully. Obviously with the rages, but your ears do tune into that after a while. But yeah, I mishear quite a lot, but I found that's never caused me personally problems. I can't see why it would be an issue. And I have worked with other people with all sorts of disabilities in the law profession. I mean, have you, Bryony? Have you worked with other people with
Yes,
disabilities?
I've worked. I co-mediated as a family mediator, often with a colleague who also had hearing difficulties, and he was a senior partner in a large local law firm. And it was a question for him of just making those adjustments, like making sure that we were seated in places where he could see the people that were talking to him, and making sure there were no distracting noises, that sort of thing. I've worked with colleagues who had severe mobility issues, colleagues who had visual impairment, and many who are neurodivergent. So, so yes, I think it's possible. I guess one question that springs out of this one is, do you think it's a good idea to disclose a disability? Because that's something that people often feel uh, uncomfortable or uncertain with doing.
I think it's a decision for people individually. It depends the nature of the disability, doesn't it? Or what challenges they face. I personally I would share it for myself, um, because then mo most people, I want to work somewhere and with people that embrace it as well. So that's quite important to me. I mean, I don't know how you would answer it as well, Bryony. I presume,
Mm.
would you have a similar response or?
Oh gosh, I think it would depend. If I were my um, junior self, as it were, applying for my first job with the conditions that I do have, I'm not sure I would have disclosed. Um, because I was applying for the bar, it was competitive enough being a woman. And we sort of used to face the you'll have to be twice as good as any man because our local solicitors don't like instructing women. So I think I probably wouldn't. Nowadays, yes, I would. I think because I the experience and the skills that people from with all sorts of backgrounds bring, I think is useful. So I sort of coming on to what you said earlier, I think that there are ways of turning that to your advantage. Having said that, I'm not it would depend on the issue that I was facing and the type of job I was trying to do. So, for instance, if I would get migraines after 10 minutes of reading regularly, I probably wouldn't be looking for a role where I spent all my day reading documents. I might look for a legal role where I'd spend more time in court, for instance. So I guess for a first job, I would temper enthusiasm with a bit of realism, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So, what challenges would somebody with a disability face in actually making an application? What sort of advice might you give in doing your CV and attending an interview?
Again, that's a really difficult one to answer. I'm probably not the best person to answer this. I know we've got a really strong careers team, haven't we? But as I say, I always work backwards and try and see a strength and see I would still evidence and prove how I can still do all these different roles by doing voluntary work, by doing other things as well. So that I can demonstrate that I can meet what they're looking for, the competencies. And I would do that anyway for everybody. I mean, I think that advice applies to everybody. But as you talk, and I say, I certainly used to instruct a blind barrister as well, who was totally blind, and he'd present in courts, and that was many years ago. And I think we've probably moved on with accessibility even more. So yeah, I mean, I think certainly seek advice of our careers team as well. They're poised and there to help you, and they're the experts with CVs and applications for all our students to say.
Yeah. And I think it is worth, if you do have a condition that can be assisted, then it is actually worth, if you're getting an interview, talking with the person who's setting up the interview to say, well, what assistance is there? Do we have induction loops? Do we have, could I have a room where there's not too much background noise? That sort of thing. I don't think there's any shame in asking for that, for anything that will help you feel more comfortable and perform at your very best. So I hope
Yeah.
that's helpful. Were there any other questions? Grace, how are we doing for time?
We are just approaching the end, so if I
Right,
share the
perfect.
slides, if you give me a few seconds.
Of course.
And I would say to everybody, I mean, I had the best fun ever. I loved being a lawyer. I loved doing different roles. And say I was probably a little bit unusual because lots of people like to very much specialize or have a very clear pathway. But I just went with the flow, and it took me where I ended up. And I say I loved every minute of it.
Oh, it's lovely response. So thank you, Mel, for answering my question. Going deaf was something that happened halfway through my law degree, so I'm a bit nervous with it. So thank you for giving advice. That's lovely, and I'm glad it was helpful. So just to finish off, then, to remind you that we do have a fantastic careers and employability service staffed by some lovely people who just wish that more students would come and talk to them. I know because I've spoken to the careers service, and they just love it when they can help people. So it's on your Law Study Home website, and you can find links to the careers service I believe it's on the left-hand side. I think it's also linked from the Law Student Home page, isn't it? There's an employability there. Lots of downloadable guides, including career planning guides, and all sorts of things where you can actually think about, well, what other careers are there in law? Don't have to be a solicitor or a barrister in private practice, as Mel has shown. What else might there be that could use my legal skills but would feel comfortable? There's the resource for Build Your Future Career with Confidence, which you can link to. And just to remember what the career service says, and I know this from my experience, whatever other people might say to you, employers love OU students, not just because you've got a good law degree, but because you have gained that degree whilst balancing all sorts of other things. And that shows that you've got resilience, that you've got organizational skills, that you've got determination, and all of those things make you a good candidate. So do remember to put those sorts of things on your CVs. And the support from the career service is available for you for up to 3 years after you've finished your study. So do visit the career service. They are great. So another slide, or is that everything? Oh yes, the final slide. It's been brilliant to have you you join us. It would really help us if you could just complete the feedback survey so that we can gauge whether these sessions are useful and interesting for people and how we might do them better on another time. So if you just click on the link on the form, that you should be able to fill that in. There's also a link in the Q&A box if you can't get the one on the slide to work. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and huge thanks to Mel for sharing her experiences, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you all. I want to start the recording.